All right, Shalom Israel. We are about to get started right now. I see y'all in the comments. Don't worry about the thumbnail. We just had to utilize what we have for the moment today. So now we're gonna start. I wanna get up there real quick. What's going on, everybody? It is Wednesday night. It is World History with True Nation. I'm gonna be teaching you guys and showing you guys and guiding you guys through this. My name is Aman Allah. To my right is
Rakab Allah.
yes, sir. And we're gonna start. So last time, the last World History, rather, even we left off from Saul. This was a couple weeks ago. We had tabernacles in between. We had new moon. Excuse me. We had tabernacles in between. So that delayed a lot of the normal scheduled program. But if y'all remember from last time, we ended off basically with Saul dealing with the beginning upcomings with David. So from there, we're going to shift on David, but Saul is still somewhat in the mix as we're going to keep going on. So we're going to get in 1 Samuel. We're getting 1 Samuel, and let me see where we're going to start off real quick. Chapter 16, and you can start at verse 14, sort of where we just left off last time.
This is the book of 1 Samuel, chapter 16, and verse 14. But the Spirit of the Lord departed from Saul, and a distressing spirit from the Lord troubled him. And Saul's servants said to him, Surely a distressing spirit from God is troubling you. Let our master now command your servants who are before you to seek out a man who is a skillful player on the harp. And it shall be that he will play it with his hands when the distressing spirit from God is upon you, and you shall be well. So Saul said to his servants, Provide me now a man who can play well, and bring him to me.
So this was the beginning searches of when David was basically chosen. So David was found and sought out. He was able to play well, and he was able to quench the evil spirit and the thoughts and the feelings that was being put upon Saul from the Most High. So because of that, Saul decides to make him close to him. His armor bearer was basically like, not necessarily like your general, your right-hand man, but the one that you're pretty much training up and showing the ropes to. So that's what David becomes to Saul. Go to verse 19 in that same chapter.
Verse 19. Wherefore Saul sent messengers unto Jesse, and said, Send me David thy son, which is with the sheep. And Jesse took an ass laden with bread, and a bottle of wine, and a kid, and sent them by David his son unto Saul. And David came to Saul and stood before him, and he loved him greatly, and he became his armor bearer. And Saul sent to Jesse, saying, Let David, I pray thee, stand before me, for he hath found favor in my sight.
So at this point, too, Samuel had just anointed David as well, too. So these are things that were automatically transpiring and going to transpire. But David he was anointed, but he wasn't there yet. He still has some time to actually be put in his position in a role, but still the Most High's anointing was still on him. So it's a matter of time until, eventually the will of the Most High becomes fulfilled. So he has to go through some things during that. You go to chapter 17 and you read at verse 1.
Now the Philistines gathered together their armies to battle, and were gathered together at Shekah, which belongeth to Judah, and pitched between Shekah and Azekah and Ephes Damim. And Saul and the men of Israel were gathered together, and pitched by the valley of Elah, and set the battle in array against the Philistines. And the Philistines stood on a mountain on one side, and Israel stood on a mountain on the other side. and there was a valley between them.
So at this point in time, the Philistines is now going up against Israel because that's just been their MO for a minute. They're going up against Israel. Saul's in charge at the time, and you see what?
They going up against the Philistines again.
Yes, definitely again. And in order to solve the dispute in the battle, the Philistines decided to be like, look, we're going to give a champion, and you guys give us a champion. So that's why they chose Goliath. And then at this point in time, everyone's pretty much fearing Goliath because he was credited to be known as a giant, and people was just not feeling that. So no one in the whole army and in the whole towns of Israel was really wanting to go against this person. Let's go to 17 and 12.
Verse 12. Now David was the son of the Ephrathite of Bethlehem, Judah, whose name was Jesse, and he had 8 sons. And the man went among men for an old man in the days of Saul. And the 3 eldest sons of Jesse went and followed Saul to the battle. And the names of his 3 sons that went to the battle were Eliab, the firstborn, and next unto him Abinadab, and the third Shammah. And David was the youngest, and the 3 eldest followed Saul. But David went and returned from Saul to feed his father's sheep at Bethlehem.
So at this point in time, no one was really giving credit or credence to David because he was, for all intents and purposes, a simple person, not really seen as a warrior of warriors, even though doing his shepherding and his flocking, he still, had to defend and protect his sheep from bears and lions and such like that. But he wasn't seen in the eyes of the military at that time as being capable of doing these things. So he's kind of just on the outside looking in and following around. But full of the Spirit, go down to verse 32.
Verse 32. And David said to Saul, let no man's heart fail because of him. Thy servant will go and fight with the Philistine. And Saul said to David, thou art not able to go against the Philistines to fight with him, for thou art but a youth, and he a man of war from his youth. And David said unto Saul, thy servant kept his father's sheep, and there came a lion and a bear, and took a lamb out of the flock. Salakia. And I went out after him, and smote him, and delivered it out of his mouth. And when he arose against me, I caught him by his beard, and smote him, and slew him. Thy servant slew both the lion and the bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine shall be as one of them, seeing he have defiled the armies of the living God.
So David's basically letting him know that, look, I'm not new to this. Like, I know how to, put hands and go to war when it's needed to. The same thing that I did back then, I can apply. It's the same blueprint, and I could use it for this. And on top of all that, beyond what my own capabilities are, the battle is the Most High. And I believe the Most High can utilize me to win this battle. So after helpful consideration by Saul, he's like, all right, go for it and do it, because nobody else, and myself included, is not about to do this. So, that's what happens right now. We can read into it. Go to verse 38.
38?
Yes.
Verse 38. And Saul armed David with his armor, and he put an helmet of brass upon his head. Also he armed him with a coat of mail. And David girded his sword upon his armor, and he essayed to go, for he had not proved it. And David said unto Saul, I cannot go with these, for I have not proved them. And David put them off him. And he took his staff and his hand, and chose him 5 smooth stones out of the brook, and put them in his shepherd's bag which he had, even in a scrip. And his sling was in his hand, and he drew near to the Philistine.
So again, not being necessarily a military man at that point, he's not comfortable with the military equipment, but he's comfortable enough being like, look, the things that I'm used to, I'm gonna just bring that. I'm gonna bring my shepherding equipment. So David is the epitome of when people say don't bring a knife to a gunfight. This man brought a knife to a gunfight, basically at the equivalent of that time. So he goes on and he does that, and we can go to verse 48. So before this verse, David and Goliath are kind of exchanging words. Goliath is, basically trash talking Israel, and David begins trash talking Goliath. So now they're about to get it started. Verse 48.
Verse 48. And it came to pass, when the Philistines arose and came and drew nigh to meet David, that David hasted and ran toward the army to meet the Philistine. And David put his hand in his bag, and took thence a stone, and slang it, and smote the Philistine in his forehead, that the stone sunk into his forehead, and he fell upon his face of the earth. So David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and with a stone, and smote the Philistine, and slew him. But there was no sword in the hand of David. Therefore David ran, and stood upon the Philistine, and took his sword, and drew it out of the sheath thereof, and slew him, and cut off his head therewith. And when the Philistines saw their champion was dead, they fled.
So in typical, not even just Israelite fashion, this is what they was doing back in the day. Okay, that's what they still do. When you defeat your opponent, it's typical to kind of humiliate them by taking the corpse and the body and showboating that around to your community, seeing as how you won, and then that puts fear into the enemy's eyes as well too. And again, these are tactics, war tactics that existed back then and still exist today. We just are not really privy of what the military does too much, unless you're on YouTube, on the internet, and you're looking for stuff like that. So that's what David does against Goliath. So the Lord was with him in this fight, and that was all it took to make the Philistines retreat at this point in time. Go to verse 52.
Verse 52. And the men of Israel and of Judah arose and shouted and pursued the Philistines until thou come to the valley and to the gates of Ekron. And the wounded of the Philistines fell down by the way. The wounded to fell down by the way to Shearim, even unto Gath, and unto Ekron. And the children of Israel returned from chasing after the Philistines, and they spoiled their tents. And David took the head of the Philistine and brought it to Jerusalem. But he put his armor in his tent. And when Saul saw David go forth against the Philistine, he said unto Abner, the captain of the host, Abner, whose son is the youth. And Abner said, As thy soul liveth, O king, I cannot tell. And the king said, Inquire thou whose son the stripling is.
So you can even tell right now that even though Saul was the one that initially took David, he still wasn't really thinking too much considering of him, because at this point they're saying, who is this kid? Like, this is the same one that played the harp to make your evil spirits go away, and the same one that literally asked you to go fight, the Philistines. But even still, at this point, Saul's like, wait a minute, who is this again? So that's just indicative of knowing that, the Spirit of the Most High was on him, and he's anointed to be questioning and be like, really, who is this person? That's what they really wanted to know. They were basically seeing the Spirit of the Most High is on this person, and we got to test this. So at that point, Saul's own son in chapter 18, Jonathan, seeing David's valiantness because he himself was a warrior and a captain of a good amount of his father's military, he's like, man, this is going to be my boy now. This is basically going to be my best friend. 18:1.
Chapter 18 and verse 1. And it came to pass, when he had made an end of speaking unto Saul, that the soul of Jonathan was knit with the soul of David. And Jonathan loved him as his own soul. And Saul took him that day, and would let him go no more home to his father's house. Then Jonathan and David made a covenant, because he loved him as his own soul. And Jonathan stripped himself of the robe that was upon him, and gave it to David, and his garments, even to his sword.
So he basically gave him, for that covenant, and most covenants that you make, there's gifts that are exchanged. That's a respect that Jonathan had unto David, and a respect so much that in the future to come, that Jonathan would more so side with the anointing of the Most High than his own father. So that is the purpose of the Spirit of the Most High working through David and around David as well too, to put him in his future position and perspective. Go to verse 6. But Saul himself, he's not feeling this because if you remember from previously before, Samuel had already told Saul, you're not, the Most High is not going to make you king. Even though you're king right now, the Most High is basically taking that away. But Saul is slowly coming to that realization. Verse 6.
And it came to pass as they came, when David was returned from the slaughter of the Philistine, that the woman came out of all cities of Israel, singing and dancing to meet King Saul, with tabrets, with joy, and with instruments of music. And the woman answered one another as they played, and said, Saul hath slain his thousands, and David his 10,000s.
And that was the nail in the coffin. That saying, we did, but it overlaps. It overlaps from the last lesson. But this particular song that the women sang was basically the nail in the coffin for Saul. And this thing gets brought up all throughout, I think later in this chapter and even in 2 Samuel as well too, just because of this song. This is what David becomes known for, and Saul is known for as well too, but is basically that fueling jealousy because of this particular song right here. So throughout the rest of this chapter, Saul begins plotting against David. He uses a number of tactics. He uses his worst daughter. To marry for David, thinking that she's going to get him caught up. He's going to focus only on her. He's not going to do any of the works. That doesn't necessarily play out. Read verse 17 in chapter 18.
Verse 17. And Saul said to David, Behold, my elder daughter Merab, her will I give thee to wife. Only be thou valiant for me, and fight the Lord's battles. For Saul said, Let not mine hand be upon him, but let the hand of the Philistines be upon him. And David said unto Saul, Who am I? And what is my life or my father's family in Israel, that I should be son-in-law to the king? But it came to pass at the time when Merab, Saul's daughter, should have been given to David, that she was given unto Adriel the Maholathite to wife. And Michal, Saul's daughter, loved David, and they told Saul, and the thing pleased him. And Saul said, I will give him her, that she may be a snare to him, and that the hand of the Philistines may be against him.
So he had to, in getting the wife that more than likely for Saul's vision wasn't going to be good for him, he also had to do a stipulation. He had to go kill some Philistines and bring their forces. This is something that David accomplished and did. So that was basically his bride dowry for Michal, which he ended up, making things work out well for it anyway. So go to chapter 19 and read from verse 1. This is the continuing persecution of David by Saul.
Chapter 19 of 1 Samuel, verse 1. And Saul spake to Jonathan, his son, and to all his servants, that they should kill David. But Jonathan, Saul's son, delighted much in David. And Jonathan told David, saying, Saul, my father, seeketh to kill thee. Now therefore, I pray thee, take heed to thyself until the morning, and abide in a secret place, and hide thyself.
And this is going to be a continuing thing. Most of David's life until his old age, when he finally passes on the kingdom, a lot of David's life was put in hiding. He was always somewhere else. He was never in one place for too long. He was always on the go because of this instance right here, jealousy of Saul, some of his own mistakes that we're going to get into, and then also his wisdom as well too, knowing like I can't be right now. I got to dip. So him being on the run and then having that help from that insider voice like Jonathan and then some other people. These are the things that you see consistently that David would never really had in his rise to being a king. He didn't have too much stability. He had no rest in a sense like that. Okay, so Jonathan is warning him, and with that warning, go to verse 8 in the same chapter.
Verse 8, and there was war again, and David went out and fought with the Philistines, and slew them with a great slaughter, and they fled from him. And the evil spirit from the Lord was upon Saul, as he sat in his house with his javelin in his hand, and David played with his hand. And Saul sought to smite David even to the wall with the javelin, but he slipped away out of Saul's presence, and he smote the javelin into the wall, and David fled and escaped that night. Saul also sent messengers unto David's house to watch him and to slay him in the morning. And Michal, David's wife, told him, saying, If thou save not thy life tonight, tomorrow thou shalt be slain.
So again, he got two aides, in his youth, his best friend and his wife, which is their brothers and sisters. So both of them are working towards David and against Saul, because again, Saul had an evil spirit, and it was pretty apparent that David has the anointing of the Most High. So being how we love the Most High and we love David, we're going to help him. We're not going to help our own father. So that's what, is the consistent thing going on. So at this point in time, Jonathan is going to reestablish the covenant that he makes with David, and that's important because it explains how he deals with the whole house of Benjamin after this ordeal. And, we're going to get into that shortly. But after that second covenant is made between his best friend, that's when David officially is on the run for the whole lifespan of Saul being alive. So from chapter 20 and onwards and the rest of 1 Samuel, David is not in a stable place. And we're going to get into those details. Go to chapter 20 and verse 35.
Chapter 20 and verse 35. And it came to pass in the morning that Jonathan went out into the field at the time appointed with David, and a little lad with him. And he said unto his lad, Run, find out now the arrows which I shoot. And as the lad ran, he shot an arrow beyond him. And when the lad was come to the place of the arrow which Jonathan had shot, Jonathan cried after the lad and said, Is not the arrow beyond thee? And Jonathan cried after the lad, Make speed, haste, stay not. And Jonathan's lad gathered up the arrows and came to his master.
So at this point, there was basically the final meeting between David and Jonathan, his best friend, and he knew that, hey, if you don't leave, my dad's going to kill you. You can't just sit around, and think the Most High is going to protect you and not do anything about it. You got to go. And I'm giving you this as advice that you just need to do. So David's like, yeah, you're right. I'm going to get out of here. So he leaves. Chapter 21 and verse 1.
Chapter 21 of 1 Samuel, verse 1. Then came David to Nob, to Ahimelech, the priest. And Ahimelech was afraid at the meeting of David, and said unto him, Why art thou alone, and no man with thee? And David said unto Ahimelech, the priest, The king hath commanded me a business, and hath said unto me, Let no man know anything of the business whereabout I send thee, and what I have commanded thee. And I have appointed my servants to such and such a place.
So David isn't just alone. He's got servants with him too that he's also on the run with. But he's approaching Ahimelech, who's the priest, and he basically is not giving him the full details. But look, I need you to help me, man. I'm kind of hungry now. I've been on the run for 3 days. So Ahimelech eventually is like, well, look, all I have is, holy bread. But I have the old one. You can eat that, but you just cannot eat the one that belongs to the temple. David's like, that's cool. And the priest is like, yeah, that's cool too. So that's something that Christ brings up in later in the Gospels in the New Testament, to refute the Pharisees and their over righteousness and trying to bring something against Christ and disciples. And it's one of the examples that Christ eventually talks about is like, hey, didn't he eat holy bread? But the technicalities was it wasn't the holy bread for the day. It was old, but not anybody could just have it. Again, David was anointed. David did a lot of things that being anointed that normal people wouldn't be able to do, such as handling the Ark of the Covenant. That's something we'll get into later in the chapter as well, too. Let's jump to, can I just explain that he gave him the holy bread? Continue verse 11.
Verse 11. And the servants of Achish said unto him, Is not this David the king of the land? Did they not sing one to another of him in descents, saying, Saul hath slain his thousands, and David his 10,000s? And David laid up these words in his heart, and was sore afraid of Achish, the king of Gath.
All right, so basically what's going on here is David is he goes to what land, what part of the land is he going to? It doesn't say, but he's going to basically the Philistine camp, and he wants to stay with the Philistines. The king's name is Achish, and Achish is like, wait a minute. Achish doesn't really even know, but his chieftains, like his servants, are like, hey, this man is David. This is the same one that they said that David or Saul killed his thousands, but David killed his thousands. Again, that song just keeps sticking and sticking. That was the nail on the head. So that is his report. That's his name amongst the Philistines. And then once they recognize that, David's like, oh, shoot. You know, he gets scared, but he utilizes his fear in a way to escape. I don't want you guys to read that. Continue on.
And David laid up these words in his heart, and was sore afraid of Achish, the king of Gath. And he changed his behavior before them, and feigned himself mad in their hands, and scrabbled out on the doors of the gate, and let his spittle fall down upon his beard. Then said Achish unto his servants, Lo, ye see the man is mad. Wherefore then have ye brought him to me? Have I need of mad men, that ye have brought this fellow to play the madman in my presence?
So David basically does like a emergency red flag move. He starts going basically, as people say, full retard, and and that saves him, because the king's like, man, we have enough retarded people here. Why'd y'all even bring him to me? Why am I even concerned? Look at this man. He's drooling and sobbing. He's acting crazy. I don't want him. So David's like, okay, cool. I got out of that. Chapter 22 and verse 1. Continue from there.
David therefore departed thence, and escaped to the cave Adullam. And when his brethren and all his father's house heard it, they went down thither to him. And everyone that was in distress, and everyone that was in debt, and everyone that was discontented, gathered themselves unto him, and he became a captain over them. And there were with him about 400 men.
So David starts building, his loyal people that were loyal to him, loyal to the Most High, to himself, while still on the run. So he's gathering his own, military or paramilitary at this time. Meanwhile, Saul is still looking for David. He's still tracking him down. Like, he has intelligence, the same way we have our phones today, and you could track anybody with your phone. Saul and his kingdom, they had a way to track down whoever they needed to find, and it was David. Whether it's by word of mouth, and, talking to unsuspecting people, he found a way to basically trace David's steps, 3 steps behind to find out where he was with and who he was at. So in this case, they know that he was with Ahimelech, the priest, and that Ahimelech gave him showbread to eat. And because of doing that, Saul makes a dumb, brash mistake by killing this priest. Go to chapter 22, same chapter, and verse 6.
When Saul heard that David was discovered, and the men that were with him, now Saul abode in Gibeah under a tree in Ramah, having his spear in his hand, and all his servants were standing about him. Then Saul said unto his servants that stood about him, Hear now, ye Benjamites, will the son of Jesse give every one of you fields and vineyards, and make you all captains of thousands and captains of hundreds? That all you have conspired against me, and there is none that showeth me that my son hath made a league with the son of Jesse.
So basically, all that Saul has on his side is his own tribe, the whole tribe of Benjamin. They're the only ones that are ride and die for him. And you're going to see that as the story continues. Jump down to verse 11. This is what he does to the priest.
Then the king sent to call Ahimelech, the priest, the son of Ahitub, and all his father's house, the priests that were in Nob, and they came all of them to the king. And Saul said, Hear now, thou son of Ahitub. And he answered, Here I am, my lord. And Saul said unto him, Why have ye conspired against me, thou and the son of Jesse? in that thou hast given him bread and a sword, and hast inquired of God for him, that he should rise against me to lie in wait as this day? Then Ahimelech answered the king and said, and who is so faithful among all thy servants as David, which is the king's son-in-law, and goeth at thy bidding, and is honorable in thine house? Did I then begin to inquire of God for him? Be it far from me. Let not the king impute anything unto his servant, nor to all his house of my father. For thy servant knew nothing of all this, less or more. And the king said, thou shalt surely die, Ahimelech, thou and all thy father's house. And the king said unto the footmen that stood about him, turn and slay thy priests of the Lord, because their hand is also with David, and because they knew when he fled, and did not show it to me. But the servants of the king would not put forth their hand to fall upon the priests of the Lord. And the king said to Doeg, turn thou and fall upon the priests. And Doeg the Edomite turned and he fell upon the priests, and slew on that day 85 persons that did not wear a linen ephod.
So Saul, in his continuing falling progression, is just wilding out. He tries to tell his own Benjamite army, kill these priests, but the Benjamites are at least wise to be like, nah, I mean, we're following you, but that's going against the Most High. So Saul's like, all right, y'all not gonna do it. I got Doeg, the Edomite. So at this point in time, again, you had the heathen Esau, some of Esau's included, that were willing to, be in subjection to under our kingdom. But again, you could just already see these people don't have the same regard for the holy things like our people do. That's why Doeg, the Edomite, was like, I'll do it. I'm going to just please the king. But that's something that was not pleasing to the Most High, which you can see the rest of the Benjamites at least had enough fear to. But again, Saul and the position that he was in did not care. Saul was so blinded in his jealousy and hatred of David that he was willing to go to any means. And that wasn't the first one, or rather, that wasn't the last one. That's still messing up in the eyes of the Most High. You're not giving the Most High respect in that regards. Not to read it because we're strained for time, but one man does escape. So Doeg kills Ahimelech and his about 40-something sons, but one son does escape. His name is Abiathar. So he escapes, and he will play out, a better role later as the story continues. So now back in David's perspective, chapter 23. You can read verse 1.
Then they told David, saying, behold, the Philistines fight against Keilah, and they rob the threshing floors. Therefore David inquired of the Lord, saying, shall I go and smite these Philistines? And the Lord said unto David, go and smite the Philistines and save Keilah.
So David is still, and even in his exile, he's still accomplishing the will of the Most High by getting rid of the heathen from Israelite territory. So he's still doing what's expected of him, even though he's not even in the king position. So he's still taking out, with having Saul, his own brother and enemy, he's still taking out the heathens from the land and putting them in subjection to Israel as a nation in general. So this is one of the cities that he also liberates. And lo and behold, the one priest that was not killed, Abiathar, he comes and informs David of exactly what happened. Verse 6.
And it came to pass, when Abiathar, the son of Ahimelech, fled to David to Keilah, that he came down with an ephod in his hand. And it was told Saul that David was come to Keilah. And Saul said, God hath delivered him into mine hand, for he is shut in by entering into a town that hath gates and bars. And Saul called all the people together to war, to go down to Keilah to besiege David and his men. And David knew that Saul secretly practiced mischief against him. And he said to Abiathar, the priest, bring hither the ephod. Then said David, O Lord, God of Israel, thy servant hath certainly heard that Saul seeketh to come to Keilah to destroy the city for my sake. will the man of Keilah deliver me up into his hand? Will Saul come down as thy servant hath heard? O Lord God of Israel, I beseech thee, tell thy servant. And the Lord said, he will come down. Then said David, will the man of Keilah deliver me and my men into the hand of Saul? And the Lord said, they will deliver thee up.
Man, so this is the amazing and special thing of not only David's, I guess you would say, childlike humility towards the Most High and understanding that he's a father. The thing about David is David never was trying to go above the instructions that he was supposed to do. Yes, David was a man of war, but David, as we're going to see, never shed unnecessary blood that did not need to be shed. All he ever did was ask the Most High for direction, and that's why it was a godsend when Ahimelech's last son came with the ephod and he inquired of the Lord. And the Lord basically told him, you have to leave this city because the inhabitants will deliver you up to Saul. So David's like, okay, it's not good to be here. I got to keep being on the move. As I said, David's constantly on the move. So he leaves that city, seeing that it's not good for them to be there. But all because he asked the Most High. He didn't just think about, this is probably the best way to go. But no, the Most High gave him the instructions because he asked for it and he followed them. So read verse 14. So he's somewhere else now.
Verse 14. And David abode in the wilderness in strongholds, and remained in a mountain in the wilderness of Ziph. And Saul sought him every day, but God delivered him not into his hand. And David saw that Saul was come out to seek his life, and David was not in the wilderness of Ziph in a wood. And Jonathan, Saul's son, arose and went to David into the wood, and strengthened his hand in God. And he said unto him, fear not, for the hand of Saul my father shall not find thee, and thou shalt be king over Israel, and I shall be next unto thee, and that also Saul my father knoweth. And they two made a covenant before the Lord, and David abode in the wood, and Jonathan went to his house.
Last meeting ever, because after that, he and his father dies. So now you guys can read, we can start at, you can keep reading on. I'm gonna explain as we go. Keep reading from there. Verse 19.
Verse 19. Then came up the Ziphites to Saul, to Gibeah, saying, do not David hide himself with us in strongholds in the wood, in the hill of Hakilah, which is on the south of Jeshimon? Now therefore, O king, come down according to all the desire of thy soul to come down, and our part shall be to deliver him into the king's hand. And Saul said, blessed be ye of the Lord, for ye have compassion on me.
So now you get more of an understanding of how Saul was even getting all this intelligence. He was also getting intelligence from his own enemies, both David and his own enemies, but utilizes them because he's just like, I'm just focused on this man right here. So it is what it was. But David always had a way to escape from that. Verse 25.
Saul also and his men went to seek him, and they told David, wherefore he came down into a rock and abode in that wilderness of Maon. And when Saul heard that, he pursued after David in the wilderness of Maon. And Saul went on this side of the mountain, and David and his men on that side of the mountain. And David made haste to get away for fear of Saul. For Saul and his men compassed David and his men round about to take them.
So it got to the point so much to where Saul was pursuing David so hard that they eventually did meet up in the same campground. But by the will of the Most High, David was not only aware, but David was close by, and he had the opportunity to assassinate the assassinator, but he did not do that. And that's one of two times. Go to 24 and 24 and verse 5.
And it came to pass afterward that David's heart smote him, because he had cut off Saul's skirt. And he said unto his men, the Lord forbid that I should do this thing unto my master, the Lord's anointed, to stretch forth mine hand against him, seeing he is the anointed of the Lord. So David stayed his servants with these words, and suffered them not to rise against Saul. But Saul rose up out of the cave and went on his way. David also arose afterward and went out of the cave, and cried after Saul, saying, My lord the king. And when Saul looked behind him, David stooped with his face to the earth and bowed himself. And David said to Saul, Wherefore hardest thou men's sword, saying, Behold, David seeketh thy hurt? Behold, this day thine eyes have seen how that the Lord had delivered thee today into mine hand in the cave. And some bade me kill thee, but mine eye spared thee. And I said, I will not put forth my hand against my Lord, for he is the Lord's anointed. Moreover, my father, see the skirt of thy robe in my hand, for in that I cut off the skirt of thy robe, and killed thee not. Know thou and see that there is neither evil nor transgression in my hand, and I have not sinned against thee, yet thou huntest my soul to take it.
So David is still expressing his righteousness towards Saul. Like, look, I know you're the Most High's anointed. I could have easily took your life as you've been pursuing me, but guess what? You slipped, and I could have got you, but I love the Most High, and you should love the Most High too, and you should try to make peace with me, because look at the skirt of your garment. And Saul looks, and lo and behold, while he was sleeping, he's like, oh, dang, I did slip up. I was not aware of that situation. My guards weren't even on point at that time. So David's like pleading with Saul, like, look, stop. Just, let things play out. You can still be alive. You can still be in the kingdom, but just stop pursuing to kill me. But Saul wasn't hearing it, but he does feel sorry for the moment until, he still has that driving spirit of jealousy still upon him. Go to verse 17.
Verse 17. And he said to David, Thou art more righteous than I, for thou hast rewarded me good, whereas I have rewarded thee evil. And thou hast showed me this day how that thou hast dealt well with me, for as much as when the Lord had delivered me into thy hand, thou killed me not. For if a man find his enemy, will he let him go well away?
Which is not normal, but that's just how noble and anointed that David was, and understanding and wise, when it comes to this military and war thing and about not killing, the Lord's anointed, formerly anointed. That's the way that he was moving. So at this point, Saul makes a so-called pact to David. He's like, okay, look, I'm done. I'm gonna make an oath to you that I'm not gonna kill you. Saul eventually does break that oath, though. Go to chapter 25 and read verse, we could start from verse 2. So Samuel, the judge and prophet Samuel, he dies at this point in time, which is going to play into what happens in a little bit moment. But now David is still in the wilderness on the run, so obviously he needs sustenance, he needs food because he's not in the main cities. So he comes upon a man named Nabal and Abigail. And matter of fact, don't read that verse, I'm just going to summarize it. He meets Nabal and Abigail, and the issue with this story is that Nabal was a man, a prideful man, that wasn't willing to help David in his time of need, in time of needing sustenance. And David was well known by everybody at that time. He was basically at the foot of Saul, so he was known to be a soldier and a warrior. He was the one that killed that killed Goliath. So Nabal knew who David was, but he was still refusing to share his household substance with him. His wife, however, Abigail, knew better, because again, she knew his reputation and she knew about the anointing of the Lord on somebody and how you're supposed to help these people, these type of people. So she goes against she goes against, how can I say, she didn't go against her husband, but she basically does in secret what her husband was not willing to do by feeding and providing David. In the course of time, David recognizes this righteousness, and Nabal eventually is put to death by the Most High just because he did not help David. And eventually, this woman becomes David's wife later on in the future. Matter of fact, immediately after his death, she becomes his wife. Go to chapter 25 and verse, 38.
Verse 38. And it came to pass about 10 days after that, the Lord smote Nabal, that he died. And when David heard that Nabal was dead, he said, Blessed be the Lord that hath pleaded the cause of my reproach from the hand of Nabal, and hath kept his servant from evil. For the Lord hath returned the wickedness of Nabal upon his own head. And David sent and communed with Abigail to take her to him to wife. And when the servants of David were come to Abigail to Carmel, they spake unto her, saying, David sent us unto thee to take thee to him to wife. And she arose and bowed herself on her face to the earth, and said, Behold, let thine handmaid be a servant to wash the feet of the servants of my Lord. And Abigail hasted and arose, and rode upon an ass with 5 damsels of hers that went after her.
Jump to verse 43.
Verse 43. David also took Ahinoam of Jezreel, and they were also both of them his wives. But Saul had given Michal, his daughter, David's wife, to Phalti, the son of Laish, which was of Gallim.
So Saul is, progressively regressing again. He gives who was already David's wife to somebody else. So Saul, does wickedly in that regards. So now, chapter 26, David and Saul have another encounter. Saul is again pursuing David, and David again spares his life in the same situation of basically, I could have got you, but I just, took the substance around you. I did that. So why do you still feel this way? Excuse me. Why do you still feel this way about me? So go to chapter 26 and verse 12. Start at verse 11. My bad.
The Lord forbid that I should stretch forth my hand against the Lord's anointed. But I pray thee, take thou now the spear that is at his bolster and the cruse of water, and let us go. So David took the spear and the cruse of water from Saul's bolster, and they gat them away. And no man saw it, nor knew it, neither awaked. For they were all asleep, because a deep sleep from the Lord was fallen upon them. Then David went over to the other side, and stood on the top of an hill afar off, a great space being between them. And David cried to the people and to Abner the son of Ner, saying, Answerest thou not, Abner? Then Abner answered and said, Who art thou that criest to the king? And David said to Abner, Art not thou a valiant man, and who is like to thee in Israel? Wherefore then hast thou not kept thy lord the king? For there came one of the people in to destroy the king thy lord.
So David is basically taunting Saul's general, which is Abner. And Abner is a special dude that plays out later in the chapter, but he's basically saying, hey, you're a powerful man. How come you couldn't even protect the king? I had to basically protect it by not killing him. So he's sending a message to Benjamin in general, like, y'all need to stop. And these are good things that David's doing, because they all play out in his eventual acceptance to being the true king over Israel. But that's a little bit later. So throughout the rest of this chapter, Saul, feels remorse again. He's like, oh yeah, David, man, you're worthy. You're worthy. You're holy. You're anointed. You could have took me out. I don't know what's getting over me. You should have. I don't know what's getting into me. Jump down to verse 25.
Verse 25. Then Saul said to David, Blessed be thou, my son David. Thou shalt both do great things, and also shalt still prevail. So David went on his way, and Saul returned to his place. Chapter 27 and verse 1. And David said in his heart, I shall now perish one day by the hand of Saul. There is nothing better for me than that I should speedily escape into the land of the Philistines. And Saul shall despair of me, to seek me any more in any coast of Israel. So shall I escape out of his hand. And David arose, and he passed over with the 600 men that were with him unto Achish, the son of Maok, king of Gath.
So this is the same king that David had to go, in the past, full retard on. He approaches him again, and he's basically like, all right, I know Saul's going to keep doing the same thing that he's been doing, and I'm going to have to keep doing the same thing I'm doing. But just to avoid all that, I'm just going to leave, period. So I'm going to go to the Philistines, and I'm basically going to be like a mercenary for the Philistines. They're going to accept me because I'm a moving excellence and stuff like that. And it's going to, for my exile, it's going to work out for a time. And that's what he does. Yeah, so he does that with his 600 men. So David's, again, he's not by himself. He's got support. He's got a company, a military. He's like, again, he's his own paramilitary at this time. He can move and operate and do the things that they know best as mercenaries, basically. And being a mercenary, man, that's an ancient worldwide tradition. Mercenaries still exist today on the dark web. You could hire anybody you want to be a hitman if you want. We're not saying to go about doing that, but it's just the principle of it. Go to verse 5 in chapter 27.
Verse 5. And David said unto Achish, if I have now found grace in thine eyes, let them give me a place in some town in the country, that I may dwell there. For why should thy servant dwell in the royal city with thee? Then Achish gave him Ziklag that day. Wherefore Ziklag pertaineth unto the kings of Judah unto this day. And the time that David dwelt in the country of the Philistines was a full year and 4 months.
So a full 1 whole year and 4 months, just, living amongst them and working for the Philistines, but in his own territory because he had moved in enough wisdom and excellency amongst the king. And he literally said, like, look, I'm not your people. I don't deserve to stay in the royal city. Just give me somewhere in the suburbs, in the rural country. And that was enough to, impress this foreign king, of the Philistines. You can read verse 8.
And David and his men went up and invaded the Geshurites and the Gezerites and the Amalekites, for those nations were of old the inhabitants of the land, as thou goest to Shur, even unto the land of Egypt. And David smote the land, and left neither man nor woman alive, and took away the sheep, and the oxen, and the asses, and the camels, and the apparel, and returned and came to Achish.
So, man, David is moving in so much excellency. So not only is he a mercenary now for this foreign king of the Philistines, but now he's taking out the people that were still in the land of Israel that in the time of Joshua should have been out. Now David, not even sitting on the throne of Israel, is doing the will of the Most High still as a mercenary. So he's definitely worthy of his remembrance throughout the ages, because everything he's doing is basically military-wise and otherwise ingenious. He's doing the will of the Most High under another authority. And when he's doing that, this is what he tells the king. Read on.
And Achish said, whither have ye made a road today? And David said, against the south of Judah and against the south of the Jerahmeelites, something like that. Jerahmeelites, and against the south of the Kenites. And David saved neither man nor woman alive, to bring tidings to Gath, saying, lest they should tell on us, saying, so did David, and so will be his manner all the while he dwelleth in the country of the Philistines.
Man, so the way he was reasoning was he basically told Achish, I went up against, in a general way, I went up against, these inhabitants of Judah. Not specifically letting me know, I went up against who specifically? The Amalekites, the Gizerites, and the Geshurites. People that were Hamites and different from the Philistines, but not necessarily Israelites. But he didn't tell them that he was killing those people, which is why he completely destroyed them. So in King Achish's mind, David is going against his own people, and that's why he keeps him as his mercenary. He's like, this man is loyal. He doesn't even like his people rejects him. He rejects his own people. But little do you know, David is actually taking out his enemies, technically Achish's enemies, but not his own people. So that's the frame of mind that he's working in. You can read on.
Verse 12. And Achish believed David, saying, he hath made his people Israel utterly to abhor him. Therefore he shall be my servant forever.
Right. Yeah, read on.
Chapter 28 and verse 1. And it came to pass in those days that the Philistines gathered their armies together for warfare to fight with Israel. And Achish said unto David, know thou assuredly that thou shalt go out with me to battle, thou and thy man. And David said to Achish, surely thou shalt know what thy servant can do. And Achish said to David, therefore will I make thee keeper of mine head forever.
So this was a test. The Philistines was about to go up against Israel, and he's telling him, he's like, all right, I know who you are, what they say of you. I'm about to go against your people right now. You're about to come with me. David's like, I'm ready for it. And he's like, all right, that's cool. I see where your loyalty aligns with. The battle at this point doesn't actually happen because something in the short future actually happens to where that doesn't happen. But we switch sides. We're going back to Saul now. Matter of fact, we're not even going to read this. So the story perspective switches over to Saul. Saul is still in despair. He's losing it. He's been losing it in his head. And he loses it so much to the point that he wants guidance from Samuel. Now, Samuel's dead. And Saul himself was the one that ran out the necromancers or the witchcraft and the wizards from Israel by his own decree. Appreciate you. So he runs out those people, but he gets it in his head. He's like, wait a minute. If they could bring people back from the dead, that's what a necromancer does. Maybe they could bring Samuel back from the dead because the Most High is not giving me instructions. I'm not sure what I should be doing in my life right now. I need Samuel. Samuel and me was really cool. He probably won't mind. So David finds a witch, and the witch does her witching duties, and summons Samuel. And Samuel's basically like, man, what are you doing? What have you done? And he's like, hey, I need your help. I need your help. Matter of fact, go to 28 and verse 12.
Verse 12. And when the woman saw Samuel, she cried with a loud voice. And the woman spake to Saul, saying, why hast thou deceived me? For thou art Saul. And the king said unto her, be not afraid, for what sawest thou? And the woman said unto Saul, I saw gods ascending out of the earth. And he said unto her, what form is he of? And she said, an old man cometh up, and he is covered with a mantle. And Saul perceived that it was Samuel. And he stooped with his face to the ground and bowed himself. And Samuel said to Saul, why hast thou disquieted me to bring me up? And Saul answered, I am sore distressed, for the Philistines make war against me. And God is departed from me, and answereth me no more, neither by prophets nor by dreams. Therefore I have called thee, that thou mayest make known unto me what I shall do.
So these are the things he's requesting of Samuel. And then Samuel makes it a point to be like, remember when you messed up here, and then you messed up here? So Samuel's now bringing all these things back to mind to explain to him why the Most High is not dealing with him. And then as a cherry on the top, even what you're doing right now is proof in the pudding why the Most High doesn't want to deal with you. You literally use sorcery and necromancy to bring me back from the dead. That's against the law, statutes, and commandments. Peace. And then he goes back to his resting place in Sheol. And Saul's like, oh, man. He's like, damn. I didn't know it was that bad. Go to verse 20.
Verse 20. Then Saul fell straightway all along on the earth, and was sore afraid because of the words of Samuel. And there was no strength in him, for he had eaten no bread all the day, nor all the night. And the woman came unto Saul and saw that he was sore troubled, and said unto him, Behold, thine handmaid hath obeyed thy voice, and I have put my life in my hand, and have hearkened unto thy words which thou spakest to me. Now,
my bad. Yeah, so she's basically like, all right, look, I did what you asked me to do. You're going to hold your end of the bargain, right? You're not going to put me to death because what I did was technically illegal for all of y'all. And he's like, yeah, I'm not gonna do it. So she babies him. She makes him a calf, kills it, he eats, and then Saul leaves, and she's, out doing the same BS that she's been doing before. Chapter 29, verse 1. Back to David and his mercenary days for a year and a half.
Now the Philistines gathered together all their armies to Aphek, and the Israelites pitched by a fountain which is in Jezreel. And the lords of the Philistines passed on by hundreds and by thousands, but David and his men passed on in the reward with Achish. Then said the princes of the Philistines, What do these Hebrews here? And Achish said unto the princes of the Philistines, Is not this David, the servant of Saul, the king of Israel, which hath been found no fault in him, since he fell unto me unto this day? And the princes of the Philistines were wroth with him. And the princes of the Philistines said unto him, Make this fellow return, that he may go again to his place, which thou hast appointed him, and let him not go down with us to battle, lest in the battle he be an adversary to us. For wherewith should he reconcile himself unto his master? Should it not be with the heads of these men? Is not this David, of whom they sang one to another in dances, saying, Saul slew his thousands, and David his 10,000s? Then Achish called David and said unto him, Surely, as the Lord liveth, thou hast been upright, and thy going out of thy coming in with me in the host is good in my sight. For I have not found evil in thee since the day of thy coming unto me unto this day. Nevertheless, the Lord's favor thee not. Wherefore now return and go in peace, that thou displease not the lords of the Philistines.
So that's the whole ordeal. The chiefs or the princes under the king are basically giving the king counsel, like, you cannot trust this man. You cannot go with him. And Kish is like, man, he's been good like for a whole year and a half. Like he's been well. He said he was going to go against the children of Israel, even though we didn't do it yet. But they basically rule in favor. No, it's not. They're like, that's not wise. Why would he go against and betray his own people? So Achish is now going to David. He's like, hey, I spoke to, my people, me and you, we cool, but like, I got to kind of, listen to the counsel of my people, and they say you can't go. So you know what, just stay back on this one. I'm going to call you when I need you. And David's like playing the part. He's like, man, what can I do? I've been good with you for a year. And he's just like, just not this time, not this battle. I'll get you on another one. The princes of our people, they just not having it right now. So, and that's, for a heathen, that's still a decent king to listen to the counsel of, your counsel, instead of just being like, I'm going to do what I want anyway. So that's how that played out. But it played out for the greater good for David anyway, because now I don't have to go and actually explicitly kill my own people, period. So these are all things that the Most High is just in the background, playing and putting in favor to. So that's what that... Chapter 30 basically is David returning back to his hometown. The Amalekites have raided their camp and took everybody. Didn't kill anybody, but they took everybody. So David and his mercenary army, they go to them and they fight against them and bring everybody back. And funny enough too, because of that raid that David's people experienced, they was actually ready to stone him. So David's like, okay, we're gonna go and do this battle, and all the plunder I'm giving to y'all. So David appeased the people, even though they was kind of mad at him because of where they was at. And that's all in chapter 30. You guys could read on your own. Chapter 31, to close out 2 Samuel, basically Saul and Jonathan, they finally die at the hands of the Philistines. And that segues into the second book of Samuel, which we still have time to go over because this book has just as much meat and juice that's important to understand about the history of David and our forefathers, period. So news gets out to David in 2 Samuel that Jonathan and Saul are dead. So this, obviously, David is like, okay, for one, I can stop being on the run. I don't have to be a mercenary for the Philistines anymore. I can come back home because now I know officially for sure Saul cannot pursue me because he's dead. But even though Saul's dead and Jonathan with him, David is still in the righteousness and the upright of his own heart. He still mourns for Saul. And this is a pattern that even some of his own people put him at fault for, is that he felt too much for, some of his own people. But again, David had an upright heart for the Most High, and he was very loving and kind, despite the fact that he was a man of war and had blood on his hand. But the blood that David had on his hand was just enough. It was never pushing the issue. However much more that he could spare life, he did that. And that's what in 2 Samuel, hopefully enough that we get into, you see those patterns continue with him. So you guys can read chapter 1 yourself on your own. So he mourns for for Samuel and Jonathan. Chapter 2 and verse Saul and Jonathan. Chapter 2 and verse 1.
And it came to pass after this that David inquired of the Lord, saying, shall I go up into any of the cities of Judah? And the Lord said unto him, go up. And David said, whither shall I go up? And he said, unto Hebron. So David went up thither, and his 2 wives also, Ahinoam the Jezreelites, and Abigail Nabal's wife, the Carmelite. And his men that were with him did David bring up, every man with his household, and they dwelt in the cities of Hebron. And the men of Judah came, and there they anointed David king over the house of Judah. And they told David, saying, that the men of Jabesh Gilead were they that buried Saul. And David sent messengers unto the men of Jabesh Gilead, and said unto them, blessed be ye of the Lord, that ye have showed this kindness unto your Lord, even unto Saul, and have buried him. And now the Lord showed kindness and truth unto you, and I also will requite you this kindness.
Jump to verse 7.
Therefore now let your hands be strengthened, and be ye valiant, for your master Saul is dead. And also the house of Judah have anointed me king over them.
So obviously loyalty, David being the tribe of Judah, the whole tribe of Judah anoints him as king first. But the other tribes of Israel have not necessarily done that yet. So again, that process of the proper anointing to the Lord of the Most High is still being succeeded with David. Because now, if you remember Abner was Saul's general, basically. So the same way that, the president of the United States is the president has a particular military general too. That's the same aspect with this man Abner. So this man Abner chooses one of Saul's sons to be king instead, because in his head, he's not really aware of the anointing of David. He's just like, look, Saul was a king, so we got to continue the kingly line. Who's the next son that we could use? Jonathan's dead. We would have chose him, but this man, Ishbaal, we're going to make him the new king of Benjamin. Jump to verse 8.
But Abner, the son of Ner, captain of Saul's host, took Ishbosheth, the son of Saul, and brought him over to Mahanaim, and made him king over Gilead, and over the Asherites, and over Jezreel, and over Ephraim, and over Benjamin, and over all Israel. Ishbosheth, Saul's son, was 40 years old when he began to reign over Israel, and reigned 2 years. But the house of Judah followed David. And the time that David was king in Hebron over the house of Judah was 7 years and 6 months.
Man, so this is 7 years of David just being king in Judah, but not being king over the rest of Israel yet. So again, this man Ishbosheth, of Benjamin, he was still the competing rulership. So all through this time, you have the military of David going against the military of the descendants of Benjamin, which is Ishbosheth and Abner. And so they have some combat issues or engagement, and then eventually with their engagement, they have some peace treaties too. So basically, you can read about that on your own from verse 12 in chapter 2 all the way down to verse 32. It talks about the general wars between Abner and a man named Joab. Joab is important to know because Joab is David's captain of the host. So Joab and Abner, they're like rivals pretty much. And that's what you read about in the rest of this chapter. But it's not so much on them. You guys can read that on your own. So let's go to chapter 3 and verse 1.
Now there was long war between the house of Saul and the house of David. But David waxed stronger and stronger, and the house of Saul waxed weaker and weaker. And unto David were sons born in Hebron, and his firstborn was Amnon of Ahinoam, the Jezreelitess, and his second Chileab of Abigail, the wife of Nabal the Carmelite.
I'm going to just stop you right there. So all these sons that he's about to explain having born, they all come from different mothers. So this is important as far as something else later that happens on in this book. But those sons who have notable moments is, again, Amnon, Absalom, Adonijah, and then Ephraim. He's not really so much of an importance as far as the history goes. But those three, Absalom, Amnon, and Adonijah, their stories play out in the rest of the story. And these are all sons of David from different mothers or different wives. Go to verse 6.
And it came to pass, while there was war between the house of Saul and the house of David, that Abner made himself strong for the house of Saul. And Saul had a concubine whose name was Rizpah, the daughter of Aiah. And Ishbosheth said to Abner, Wherefore hast thou gone in unto my father's concubine? Then was Abner very wroth for the words of Ishbosheth, and said, Am I a dog's head, which against Judah do show kindness this day unto the house of Saul thy father, to his brethren and to his friends, and have not delivered thee into the hand of David, that thou chargest me today with a fault concerning this woman?
Khan. So again, the king over the rest of Israel, the Benjamite, he basically accuses the captain Abner of something he didn't do, because Abner was basically the one, he was the star pretty much of Benjamin and the rest of Israel, whereas the king himself, he just wasn't putting in the work like Abner was. So he accuses Abner of something he doesn't do. Abner gets mad at that, and that very act of the son of Saul doing that is what makes Abner click in his head. You know what? David is supposed to be the king. So from right there, Abner puts his pride aside, puts his Benjamite lineage aside, and goes to David. He's like, look, you know what? I'm about to make a covenant. I want a covenant with you. You should be king, because this isn't working out over here. The own son is doing wickedly. I don't like this. I'd rather just be under, your authority. Go to verse 12.
Verse 12. And Abner sent messengers to David on his behalf, saying, Who is the land? Saying also, Make thy league with me, and behold, my hand shall be with thee, to bring about all Israel unto thee. And he said, Well, I will make a league with thee, but one thing I require of thee, that is, thou shalt not see my face, except thou first bring Michal, Saul's daughter, when thou comest to see my face. And David sent messengers to Ishbosheth, Saul's son, saying, Deliver me my wife Michal, which I espoused to me for 100 foreskins of the Philistines. And Ishbosheth sent and took her from her husband, even from Phaltiel, the son of Laish. And her husband went with her along weeping behind her to Bahurim. Then said Abner unto him, Go, return. And he returned.
So right now you see David's gotten the the favor, or at least the how can you say, not compromise, but the acceptance by two of the major players from the opposing civil war. Abner, who explicitly wants to make a covenant with him, and then Ishbaal, who listened to Abner from David to get Michal back. So David's kind of got good things going on for him. But David has a man named Joab, his captain, who, as the story continues, this man does not like to listen to all orders, and he likes to move on his own accord of what he thinks is best for the king and the kingdom. So all peaceful alliances, this man had a tendency to destroy all these things to keep his position. Because what happens when Abner, who David had openly admitted was a great and valiant man under Saul, now he's going to be in competition. So this is how Joab, David's captain, moves. Go to actually same chapter, read verse 22.
Verse 22. And behold, the servants of David and Joab came from pursuing a troop and brought in a great spoil with them. But Abner was not with David in Hebron, for he had sent him away, and he was gone in peace. When Joab and all the host that was with him were come, they told Joab, saying, Abner the son of Ner came to the king, and he hath sent him away, and he is gone in peace. Then Joab came to the king and said, What hast thou done? Behold, Abner came unto thee. Why is it that thou hast sent him away, and he is quite gone? Thou knowest Abner the son of Ner, that he came to deceive thee, and to know thy going out and thy coming in, and to know all that thou doest. And when Joab was come out from David, he sent messengers after Abner, which brought him against from the well of Sarah, but David knew it not. And when Abner was returned from Hebron, Joab took him aside in the gate to speak with him quietly, and smote him there under the fifth rib, that he died, for the blood of Asahel, his brother.
So the real reason why, again, Joab didn't like Abner is because previously in the tidbit that I didn't want you guys to read, I didn't want to read for you guys, Abner killed this man Joab, his brother. Even though Abner gave Joab's brother, Asahel, plenty of warning, he was like, hey, stay back. Stay back. And again, this is a mighty, valiant man that even David recognized as that. And he's telling his brothers, stay back. But this man is still steady pursuing him, and then Abner ends up killing him. So that's something that Joab had hidden deep within his heart, even though it was justified, because even though Abner killed Joab's brother, Joab killed a whole bunch of men under Abner, about 300. So it was like that blood was already, met. But Joab did what he did, telling David what he did, even though he didn't even know the plan. He clearly did not know that that Abner made a covenant with David and was coming in peace. So he did what he did and took him out. And David begins to mourn him. Go to verse 31.
And David said to Joab and to all the people that were with him, Rend your clothes and gird you with sackcloth and mourn before Abner. And King David himself followed the bier.
So David's basically like, hey, this is not of my doing. This blood is not on my hand. All this blood be upon Joab. And Joab, from this point starts stacking up, blood against him, because he keeps moving like this in things that he doesn't trust, even though it's the king's decision, David's decision to be like, I'm going to make peace with who I'm going to make peace with, and I'm going to spare life where I'm going to see I can spare life. But Joab doesn't have that same sentiment and same heart as David, as the story continues. Let me see what time it is. Oof. I'm going to briefly mention this too. So the king over all the rest of Israel, the Benjamite Ishbaal, he eventually has people conspired against him, some of his own people, and kill him. And they bring that to David like, hey, David, look, we took out your enemy. But guess what? David's like, oh, nah, you shouldn't have did that. And he kills them because David was already working towards a peace treaty with even Saul's son Ishboth. So David had a plan in mind, but again, all these people that keep acting forward and thinking they're going to do things to please the king is not pleasing the king. And this is the second time where someone did that David had to actually kill immediately. Joab, David didn't kill immediately, but when you read in the next book in the chapter, David actually instructs Solomon to kill Joab because of Joab's continual forwardness, as we hopefully can get through the rest of the stories today. But that's what happens in chapter 4. So you guys can read that all through yourself. So in beginning chapter 5, David is now officially the king over all of Israel. Chapter 5 and verse 1.
Then came all the tribes of Israel to David unto Hebron, and spake, saying, Behold, we are thy bone and thy flesh. Also in time past, when Saul was king over us, thou was he that leddest out and broughtest in Israel. And the Lord said to thee, Thou shalt feed my people Israel, and thou shalt be a captain over Israel. So all the elders of Israel came to the king to Hebron, and King David made a league with them in Hebron before the Lord, and they anointed David king over Israel.
So this is the end of the official civil war. The house of Saul is no longer at war with the house of David because Abner's dead, even though he was good. And Ishbosheth, he's dead now too, even though he was working on becoming good with David too. But now, officially, politically, David has no more enemies. So all the rest of Israel is like, okay, yeah, we're going to finally anoint you, officially make you king over all Israel. So in the coming chapters that happen, David continues going on some more wars. He goes into war with the Philistines. You guys can read that on yourself. In chapter 6, he wins back over the Ark of the Covenant, back into Israelite territory. You guys can read that upon yourself as well too. In chapter 7, the new prophet or oracle, Nathan, he begins to commend David and tell him, the Most High, said that he anointed you. He's going to do all these good things to you. He's going to make your seed well, establish your seed upon the throne and the kingdom forever. This is it. And David's like, man, all praise to the Most High. So you can read that in chapter 7 on your own. Chapter 8 is more wars that David does to keep clearing up the vicinity of the land of Israel that wasn't done in the time of Joshua. So David is still cleaning up the land in chapter 8. And then in chapter 9, David continues his covenant that he made with Jonathan by making his son sit at his table. His son, his name is Mephibosheth, so that's just continuing. David remembers the promises he makes. All the promises that he made to his best friend Jonathan, he's still keeping in his son. That's why his son sits at the king's table. That's in chapter 9. You guys can read that on yourself. In chapter 10, more wars. David's fighting against the children of Ammon. So you guys, again, you guys can read that yourself. Chapter 11, that's when David messes up. David sins by wanting Uriah the Hittite's wife, Bathsheba. This is when David, fails in his lust and wanting Bathsheba, so he devises a scheme and a plan to put Uriah the Hittite, who David reasoned he's just a heathen anyway, it don't matter if he dies, to take his wife. The Most High calls him out against that. With Nathan the prophet, David repents, and the Most High grants him that repentance, but not without continual issues basically in his household. His kid dies from Bathsheba immediately there. His son Absalom, even before Absalom, his son Amnon does, this is in chapter 13, David's son Amnon, after his sin, so the Most High can get, his just desserts, his son Amnon basically rapes his, how can I say, what would you consider? It's his sister, but it's his half-sister. And if they had done anything cordial or correct, it would have been okay. But his son Amnon rapes his half-sister, her name is Tamar, and Absalom kills his half-brother, his brother, for doing that. And as Absalom kills his brother for doing that, Absalom runs away. David is kind of like, I didn't want my son to run away, but it's understandable because my other son, Amnon, he basically raped his sister. Like he forced her, and Absalom, and this was Absalom's actual like blood sister from the same mom. So he has a different type of connection to her than, Amnon did. Amnon just loved her, but he does that and ruins that situation. So some of David's sons in his household, it begins to fall apart. And then again, this is the judgment of the Most High for him not killing. It's like the Most High is telling David, I'm not going to kill you, but your house is going to have continual sorrow and trouble. So two sons, Absalom now, he runs away. Absalom comes back. This is in chapter 14. Absalom comes back, but Absalom actually, now he wants to be in David's position. Go to chapter 14 and read from chapter 15, verse 1.
And it came to pass after this, that Absalom prepared him chariots and horses and 50 men to run before him. And Absalom rose up early and stood beside the way of the gate. And it was so that when any man that had a controversy came to the king for judgment, then Absalom called unto him and said, Of what city art thou? And he said, Thy servant is of one of the tribes of Israel. And Absalom said unto him, See, thy matters are good and right, but there is no man deputed of the king to hear thee. Absalom said, Moreover, that I were made judge in the land, that every man which have any suit or cause might come unto me, and I would do him justice. And it was so, that when any man came nigh to him to do him obeisance, he put forth his hand and took him and kissed him. And on this manner did Absalom to all Israel that came to the king for judgment.
So basically, Absalom was meeting people, prematurely at the gates before they can go to David. And, he was, flattering them. And also he was giving them judgments before they would go to David. So much to the fact that he was giving them judgments already that they probably, took the judgments and went off like that, because that was Absalom's own ambition. He's like, I want to be in this position that David's in. I want to be, giving the law and making the decisions for the people. So again, he starts doing this early on, and he does it enough to where a little bit later on, he makes a conspiracy to take over David's throne. But David, the first sign that he understands this, David decides, it's time to go back on the run. Go to 15 and verse 13.
And there came a messenger to David, saying, The hearts of the men of Israel are after Absalom. And David said unto all his servants that were with him at Jerusalem, Arise, and let us flee, for we shall not else escape from Absalom. Make speed to depart, lest he overtake us suddenly, and bring evil upon us, and smite the city with the edge of the sword.
So David is back on the run from his son Absalom, who obviously he knows what he's going to do, to the point to where he's fighting not himself, but David's military, his army is fighting against Absalom. But David's always telling them while they're fighting, look, if you get Absalom, do not put him to death. Just bring him in captive alive so I could talk with him. I could talk some sense to him. Just don't kill him. So that was his instructions to his military. But there's another instance with Joab. David's captain of the guard. Go to chapter 18. So yeah, this happens over a span of a couple of chapters. So Absalom knows what he's doing. He puts himself in that kingly position. He's officially recognized as king when David leaves. But again, David is, as far as he's going to war with him, he still says, don't kill my son. Go to chapter 18 and verse 10.
And a certain man saw it and told Joab and said, Behold, I saw Absalom hanged in an oak. And Joab said unto the man that told him, And behold, Thou sawest him, and why did thou not smite him there to the ground?
Con, so something you want to know about Absalom that I glossed over. Absalom had really long hair, and his hair when he was in this particular thicket in this forest, it got him stuck in the trees. So he's there hanging in the trees stuck. So somebody sees like, hey, I see Absalom over there. Joab's like, why did you just kill him? So now Joab's like, I'm gonna go over there and kill him now. Read verse. Read verse 12. So the men know Joab just wants to do what he wants to do, though.
And the man said unto Joab, though I should receive 1,000 shekels of silver in my hand, yet would I not put forth my hand against the king's son. For in our hearing the king charged thee and Abishai and Attai, saying, beware that none touch the young man Absalom. Otherwise I should have wrought falsehood against mine own life. For there is no matter hid from the king, and thou thyself wouldest have set thyself against me. Then said Joab, I may not tarry thus with thee. And he took 3 darts in his hand, and thrust them through the heart of Absalom, while he was yet alive in the midst of the oak. And the 10 young men that bare Joab's armor compassed about, and smote Absalom, and slew him. And Joab blew the trumpet, and the people returned from pursuing after Israel, and Joab held back the people. And they took Absalom and cast him into a great pit in the wood, and laid a very great heap of stones upon him. And all Israel fled, every one to his tent.
So Joab kills Absalom. They don't even give him the decent and proper burial that David for sure was going to do. And so David gets word of this, and this is what he says about Joab's second offense in action. Jump to, no, hold on. Oh, jump to actually chapter. Chapter 19 and verse 1.
And it was told Joab, behold, the king weepeth and mourneth for Absalom. And the victory that day was turned into mourning unto all the people. For the people heard say that day how the king was grieved for his son. And the people gat them by stealth that day into the city, as people being ashamed steal away when they flee in battle. But the king covered his face, and the king cried with a loud voice, O my son Absalom, O Absalom, my son, my son. And Joab came into the house to the king, and said, Thou hast shamed this day the faces of all thy servants, which this day have saved thy life, and the lives of the sons of thy sons, and of thy daughters, and the lives of thy wives, and the lives of thy concubines, in that thou lovest thy enemies, and hatest thy friends. For thou hast declared this day that thou regardest neither princes nor servants. For this day I perceive that if Absalom had lived, and we and all we had died this day, then it pleased thee well.
So Joab is basically giving a pretty strong rebuke to David. He's like, man, get up. Like, you complaining and crying over your son who was actively at war against you anyway, and you would rather probably him be alive than all of us. So that's what Joab is telling David. David, that does talk some sense into him, but again, David had instructions. He's like, look, I want my son to be alive. But, and Joab is basically rebuking David at this time. So he's like, all right, I'm gonna stop crying at the very least. I'm gonna just stop crying. But that was my son, and y'all didn't have to do that. So in the course of the rest of this chapter, David, again, puts himself back on the throne. Some people don't like it. Some people want to kill the people that don't like it. But even David's like, nah, A particular man named Shimei. Shimei was a Benjamite. He still felt a type of way about David. He still thinks that the house of the Benjamite house should be on the throne. So he throws some rocks at David and curses him. And then, David's army is like, yeah, we got to go kill him. And David's like, no, don't do it. I deserve this because, all these things have been messing up in my life. My family's messed up, all because of, my dealings with Bathsheba. So you know what? Give him that. That's fine. I deserve that. I'll take a cursing and a stoning from this Benjamite right here. So that goes on. Chapter 20, again, another man named Sheba. He doesn't like David, so he wants to rebel. And Joab is another instance where he goes and kills Sheba. So this man Joab is as far as military-wise, he's willing to do anything for the king to put, the king's enemies to death. But again, sometimes David's like, I'm not trying to move exactly like that. You got to follow my order. But this man Joab is always doing the most as David had seen. So he does that. David starts to basically make the house of Israel clean. In chapter 21, he basically reconciles the Gibeonite people that Saul had did wrong. So in order to reconcile that, they're saying, look, we don't want, to kill anybody, but look, the man that messed us up, which was Saul, give us his sons so they could put to death. And David's like, that's a righteous, that's righteous. So David hands over Saul's 7 sons for the Gibeonites to put to death because they had a covenant to the Most High that was broken. And the land was messed up because of that. So David had to avenge the blood of these people for the land's sake. So he does that in chapter 21. In chapter 22, David is given a really long song about his Thanksgiving and, about the Most High being with him in spite of all the being on the runs, being a mercenary, his family, or his son rather, turning against him, his own army general, not following all the orders all the time. But David's still giving a long song of praise to the Most High because he knows it's the Most High that's been directing his steps the whole time. And then chapter 23, basically it tells you about David's mighty men and his warriors, Joab and some people included. And then chapter 24 is basically the Most High finds fault with the nation of Israel, but uses David to bring that sin upon himself. So in this chapter, you see David sin by counting the number of the people, and he's given 3 choices by the prophet. He said, look, either you can be on the run for, what did he say? I think 3 years. Matter of fact, just go to chapter 24 and verse 12.
Go and say unto David, thus saith the Lord, I offer thee 3 things. Choose thee one of them, that I may do it unto thee. So Gad came to David and told him and said unto him, shall 7 years of famine come unto thee in thy land? Or wilt thou flee 3 months before thine enemies, while they pursue thee? Or that there be 3 days pestilence in thy land? Now advise and see what answer I shall return to him that sent me.
So David eventually chooses and says it's better to fall in the hands of the Most High than the hands of men, because the Most High is always going to be mercy. So he chooses plague. So a big old plague happens. 70,000 people are dying and die. But after that amount, it doesn't even extend the whole 3 days. The Most High still shows mercy because of David to the rest of the people. So he cuts the 3 days short, and the Most High says, that's enough. I need to kill anymore. So that 3 days turned into the mercy of the Most High of just maybe like 1 day. So that's why David chose wisely in that sense, in that part of the chapter. And that ends basically 2 Samuel. The little bit of pullover in 1 Kings, David is giving instruction to Solomon. Basically telling Solomon, look, this is how you're going to set your house in order. And my last and final request is you need to take care of Joab, because Joab was doing a whole bunch of things he should have done. He has blood in his hands that is not part of us. This our throne, our family lineage is not holding the blood that Joab has on his hands. So you need to take care of him. So Solomon kills Joab. He also kills Shimei, the one that threw the stones at David, that David at the time was like, I'll take that. But again, David warns him about him because this man Shimei, a Benjamite, still feels a type of way about a man of Judah being on the throne and not a Benjamite. So David tells Solomon, you got to take care of both of these people because it's necessary for you and your kingdom to be prosperous. Joab cannot be your captain because he's not going to listen to you. And Shimei, he can't live because he's just disobedient. He doesn't like Judah on the throne, period. So that's David's final instructions to his son Solomon that you guys can read about in the first 3 chapters. And that is, in summary, the life and times of King David, the shepherd king, the shepherd to king. Obviously, we skipped a lot, but read these things on your own. Not much was skipped other than some of the finer details, like some of the details in the battles, some details of, good things that David did to some people, but generally speaking, we got the life and times of David in an appropriate 2-hour lesson. Did you have anything you wanted to say, Rakab?
Nah.
All praises. Well, hopefully you guys appreciated and enjoy that, and let me know how the teachings go for Wednesdays in world history. I feel like I'm getting a lot better and making things concise and to the point and what's necessary, but you guys let me know online in person, and we go from there. But we're gonna call it a night tonight. I hope you guys enjoyed your favorite king in his history, David.
Oh no, I wasn't always right here.